Is it possible to replicate a real-world data center all within one PC? Welcome to AJ Labs. In this video, we're going to be looking at setting up GNS3 as well as VMware Workstation with multiple networks and then ensuring those networks can communicate. So in order to replicate a real data center, what we're going to need is to make sure our virtual machines have access to multiple different networks and then they can communicate with each other on those networks. In order to do that, let's take a look at how we can get that configured.
So the aim is to set up GNS3 in a way in which it can communicate with our subnets on our VMware Workstation application. So within our VMware Workstation, we're going to set up some additional subnets or networks, and they will each create a network adapter. So VMnet 2 will be the 10.2 subnet, VMnet 3 will be the 10.3, and so forth. VMnet 8 is my local home router's network, and it's basically translating, it's NATing this IP address to my local home router's IP address. So the idea is GNS3, the router that we set up here, which is our Cisco router, is going to be able to communicate and have routes for all of these routes here. So if I want to ping from this router to any of these addresses, it should be able to work, and therefore VMware Workstation, the servers or the machines or the virtual machines that we have on VMware Workstation can then communicate with each other on these various different subnets. So that's the idea, is to make sure VMware Workstation, all the networks on there are communicating with each other through this GNS3 Cisco router. So it's making sure that there's interconnectivity between the GNS3 application as well as the VMware Workstation application and our local PC, which we're using. Since we're not using physical servers and physical switches and physical routers, we are basically using one PC, and all of this is happening within one PC. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to first of all install VMware Workstation. I've already got VMware Workstation installed, as you can see here, and I've created a video previously which I detail how to install VMware Workstation and explain how to use it. So I'll post that in the post a link to that video in the description area. So if you want to know how to install VMware Workstation, take a look at that video. I won't even be installing it now. Once we do that, we need to configure our virtual networks on VMware Workstation. So we have additional networks or VLANs. What we're trying to basically replicate is a real world environment. In the real world, you have departments have different VLANs, so therefore within VMware Workstation we want to make sure our virtual machines can be on different subnets or different networks and still communicate with each other, whether they're servers or desktop clients. So that's what we're trying to replicate or simulate. So in order to configure once we configure the virtual networks, we're going to download and install GNS3, and once we download and install GNS3, we're going to import the GNS3 VM into VMware Workstation. So for me, I found installing the GNS3 locally as well as running the GNS3 VM in VMware Workstation, that works for me. We'll go through that in a moment. So what we're going to basically do is make sure that we've got the VM running and we've got the application installed locally as well. Once we install the VM or import the VM and install the application, we're going to import our iOS images, our Cisco iOS images, and into GNS3, so we've got a router image that we can use to basically create our network in GNS3. Once we do that, we're going to configure the router, and then we're going to make sure we get the connections to the VMware Workstation networks. So let's move on to configuring the virtual networks on VMware Workstation. Now I've already done this, so if I open up my VMware Workstation, once you've installed it, just open that up. I've got VMware Workstation open. I've already imported my GNS3 VM. Let me remove this and I'll show you how I imported that. Let's just remove that. So in order to set up my various networks, the VM network adapters, what I'm going to do is you need to go to edit, and then you need to edit your virtual network editor. So you need to click on that. Once we click on that, we get our virtual network editor. As you can see, I've already got multiple networks configured on here. So my 10.2 network is on VMnet 2, 10.3 is on 3, and 10.4 is on 4. And the network to my local home router is being translated or NATed to VMnet 8 with this subnet or network. So if you want to edit this, and you'll probably have nothing in here, so what you want to do is you want to say change settings. So you click on change settings. Once you click on that, you say yes, you give permissions. You have to have an administrator permissions on your machine to do this. Once you do that, what you want to do is it will give you the option to add a network. So as you can see, I've already got my network set up, as I said, but in your case you want to add a network, right? And then just like mine, you want to say VMnet 2. Obviously I can't select VMnet 2 now because I've already got it there, so you say OK. And once you do that, so let's say as an example I'd add VMnet 5, but for you it would be VMnet 2 for example. You say OK, and that will create an additional network adapter on your PC. So what you do is you click on that, and then you can say, you can sort of provide the subnet IP addresses that you want. So for me, VMnet 2 was 10.2.2.0, right? And it was a class C. It's 255.255.255.0. That's a class C IP address. I've disabled local DHCP service. So what this does is VMware Workstation will give out IP addresses to any clients or any virtual machines that are put on this VMnet adapter. So as you can see, VMnet 2, when I put an adapter, when I put a virtual machine on there, it will not be able to give out an IP address to it. If I enable that, it will give an IP address to the machine from this subnet. So I've disabled that because what I want to do is I want to create myself a DHCP server using Windows Server, and then give out the IP addresses through there. So ideally remove that, and then hopefully give your machines a manual IP address, or if you set yourself up a Windows Server IP address, then you can, a Windows Server DHCP, a Windows DHCP server, then you can use that server to give out IP addresses. Anyway, but ignore this for now, so just untick that, and then you just say OK, and that will create the network for you. So what you want to do is, just like mine, create a VMnet 2, 3, 4, and those will be your additional subnets. VMnet 8 or your NATed one should already be there, so leave that as it is, don't touch that. Let me cancel this, and that's how you basically edit your virtual networks. Once you've created your 3 additional virtual networks, or if you want to do more you can, that will then create, if I just show you, if you right click on your little network icon down here, open network and internet sharing. If I go to network and sharing center, change adapter settings, what you'll notice is VMware has created all these network adapters for me. So 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, right? If I right click on 10.2 or VMnet 2, if I go to properties, and then I go to Internet Protocol version 4, TCP/IP v4, click on properties, I've given the physical adapter here an IP address. So what I've done is I've given this a 10.2.2.2 IP address with a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask, which is a /24, and then I've also given the default gateway. Now bear in mind, this default gateway here that you see, 10.2.2.1, is going to be created, where's the image, on this router here. So this router is the default gateway, so therefore this GNS3 router will be able to physically communicate with my adapter created by VMware Workstation. Alright, so 10.2.2.2 will be able to ping and communicate with 10.2.2.1, which is an interface on this router, and therefore it will be able to communicate with not only this network but also all the other ones. So if I showed you one of the other ones, it's the same for 3. Make sure you go to each one, properties, and then just make sure you give it an IP address of whatever subnet that you've given it. 10.3.3.2 is this one, and the gateway is 10.3.3.1. The gateway will always be on the router, because remember, it's your GNS3 router that is going to be doing your routing and your communication between the networks. So it always has to be the gateway. Make sure you put that as the default gateway, and then I'll show you in here how we create the default gateway, the interface, and put the IP address on there. Alright, so just make sure you, when you go to your adapters, each one you've given an IP address. Here's number 4, properties, TCP IPv4, properties, and then the IP address of that adapter, and the default gateway. Now, just to mention, the DNS server that you see here, this is a server that I've set up, a Windows 2019 server, which has got this IP address 192.168.220.131, and basically what that server is doing for me, it's running as a DHCP server as well as a DNS server as well as my domain controller. Alright, so when my machines want to communicate with DHCP or pick up IP addresses, my virtual machines, they'll communicate with this server's IP address, which is on VMware Workstation. And right, so this IP address here, let's just cancel that, and I'll just show you my VMnet 8. Go to properties, TCP IPv4, and as you can see, yep, VMnet 8 has just got this IP address here, 192.168.221 with a 24-bit mask, and the DNS server I've put on here is my local home router. Okay, so my local home router is my DNS server for my NATed IP addresses on my VMnet 8. Right, so what we need to now do, let's minimize this, close this off, close this. So you've seen, so we've configured our virtual networks, we've seen our network adapters that were created by VMware Workstation, we've given them IP addresses, and now what we need to do is download and install GNS3. In order to download GNS3, you want to go to the GNS3 website. I'll put a link in the description area. It will ask you to sign up, just quickly sign up, and then you'll be able to download the software. You might as well also go to the GNS3 software and download the virtual machine. So you've got an option to download a version for VirtualBox, VMware Workstation, VMware ESXi, or Microsoft's Hyper-V. What I'm using is VMware Workstation, so this is the version that I've downloaded. You want to click on download on that. Once you download that, we'll then do the import. So as I've already downloaded GNS3, if I go to my folders and I go to download, let me just quickly show you what I've got. So what you're going to have in your downloads folder should be a GNS3 VMware Workstation. This is a zip file when you download it. Once you've downloaded it from this website here, once you download this, you'll get the zip file, which is there. You then extract that, and it will give you this VM Open Virtualization Format OVF file. You'll also want to have GNS3. I'm not going to install this. I'll show you basically what you need to do. Because once you've downloaded GNS3 all in one, and you've signed up for once you've signed up on this website here and you've downloaded the GNS3 client, what you want to do is double click on this application in your downloads, give it yes to permissions to install on your machine, and then you go through the installation wizard. Because I've already got it here and it's installed, I'm not going to install it, but you'll literally just go through this wizard, agree where you want it installed, and you can also select GNS3 VM here, which will enable it and I guess download it for you as well. You select that, click on next. So once you do that, you click on next, and then it will say where you want to install it. Click on next, and then which application which hypervisor you want to install your VM, your GNS3 VM on. I'm using VMware Workstation, so you'd want to click on that if you're using that too. Click on install, and then it will start doing it for you. I'm not going to do that because I've already done it. Once you've got that set up, let me just close out of this. What you can do is then it will have GNS3, the application, as well as the virtual machine set up for you. If you've just installed the application without the virtual machine, then what you need to do is go to VMware Workstation, which I've already got installed. In your case, again, we want to install this. As I said, I've got a video which I'll put the link for the video in the description area. Follow that video on how to install VMware Workstation, how to set that up. Once you've got that up and running, you want to click on your VMware Workstation, which I've already got open here. Close this. Go to VMware Workstation. You want to say File, and then you want to open a virtual machine. And then what you want to do is you want to go to your downloads area where you had your OVF file, and then you click on your GNS3 VM and then you open it. Alright, so you literally just get that opened up, and then that will basically import it into this particular location for you. You can change that if you don't have enough space on your C drive, and that's how you get that set up. So import that and that will open up the VM for you. Alright, so what we've got is we've got VMware Workstation installed. We've configured the virtual networks, and we've seen our adapters and our additional networks. You've downloaded and installed GNS3, and you've also downloaded and imported the GNS3 VM into VMware Workstation. So these are the foundations and the things we need to make sure our VMware Workstation Lab is functioning properly, and we'll be able to route, as I said, the various different networks. The next part we need to move on to is then importing the iOS image into GNS3. And once we do that, we're going to then configure the router with all the interfaces and their IP addresses, and make sure we get them connected to those VMware networks, VMware adapters that we set up on the various networks. So let's just do that. So in fact, let's just import our GNS3 VM. So click on that, which is in my downloads, import that, keep it in that location. I'll import that. The VM is imported, so let's now select it, power it on. There we go, so that's up and running. Right, one other thing we need to do, which I forgot to mention, is we need to go into our GNS3 application. Once that opens up, we need to go into Edit and then Preferences, and what we need to do is click on GNS3 VM, and we need to enable the GNS3 VM. So basically our application can talk to our GNS3 VM. Once we click on that, we can change some of these settings depending on what kind of a spec your PC has. If you've got decent specs, say you've got enough CPU resources and RAM resources, you can increase these. But I ideally keep them as they are initially, and if then you have any problems or your GNS3 application slows down, then you may want to come back into this and increase these figures. Just say OK. Let's cancel that. One other thing I did forget to mention is we need to enable the GNS3 VM in the GNS3 application. So what we need to do is go to Edit. Once we open up GNS3, our application, click on Edit, go to Preferences, and then where it says GNS3 VM, you want to click on that and select Enable the GNS3 VM. Once you do that, it will give you the hypervisor you're using, which in my case is VMware Workstation. Leave it as is. In these figures down here, your resources, if you've got plenty of resources on your machine, if you've got plenty of RAM, plenty of CPU resources, then you may want to increase these. But initially just leave it as they are, and if you have any issues with your with your GNS3 application or where it's slow, then you may want to come back to this and increase this. But for now, I'll just leave this as they are. Click on OK, and then it should connect to my GNS3 VM. There you go, it's connecting. Yep, so GNS3 VM, it's giving me the resources on there, the CPU usage, the RAM, so forth. There we are. So now that's both there. I've got both my local computer using GNS3 as well as my VMware Workstation VM using GNS3. So we've done that. Let's see what we've got now. So we've installed VMware Workstation, we've configured the virtual networks and our virtual network adapters, we've given them IP addresses as I've shown you on each network adapter, we've downloaded and installed GNS3, we have downloaded and imported GNS3 VM into VMware Workstation, we've enabled it in VMware Workstation, and we can see it's up and running now. And now what we need to do is import our Cisco IOS images so we can do our routing. So let's go on to that. So in order to import our Cisco router, we need to go to our GNS3 application, click on Edit, and then click on Preferences. So we're going to import our Cisco iOS router image. So in terms of downloading it, I'll share a link in the description as to where to download it from. Click on iOS routers. As you can see, we've got nothing here in the templates. Click on New. Run this router on my local computer, or we can run it on the GNS3 VM. Whichever one you prefer. I'll click on Run it on the VM. Click on Next. It's asking me for the image, so I've downloaded it to my GNS3 folder. Images, just over here. As you can see, it's the 2691 image. Now, once you download it, obviously locate where you've downloaded it to, and then open it from there. So click on Open. Once you've opened, it will import that. We will say Next. It will know which version it is, and then you just click on Next again. Keep everything as default. The RAM is 192 meg. Just keep that as default. Say Next. Keep the interfaces as default for now. We'll just say Next. Keep the serial interfaces as they are. Say Next. Now the idle PC is important. It's detecting it for you. It's giving you a green level. It's basically to try and make sure that the router doesn't overuse your CPU on your actual machine, or your VM, whether it's on your VM or on your local GNS application. It doesn't overuse your RAM and your CPU. So keep that as that and click on Finish. We can fine tune this later on. That's it. Once we've done that, we can apply and say OK. And then as you can see, we've got the 2691 router, which is created now. This is the only one we need for our lab. It's just one router version, and we're going to use this to do all of our routing between our VMware Workstation networks that are on our machine, as well as our GNS3 network. That's it. So we've configured the boring bit and the setup of the VMware Workstation as well as our GNS3 application. Now comes the fun bit where we start to now really go into the routing and configuration of the networks. So we want to make sure now we basically set up our router, start configuring all the IP addresses on the interfaces, give it interfaces and configure the IP addresses on them, and then connect those interfaces to our adapters that we created earlier on VMware Workstation, so they can then all communicate with each other. So let's get into now the last part of the session of the video, which is now router configuration and connection to VMware networks. So we want to go to File and then New Project. So we're going to give the project a name. So we'll just call this GNS3/VM networks or network, and we'll just save it on the default location. Okay, you can change that if you want, but we'll just keep it there. And then we'll just click on OK. Now as you can see, I've got my router on the side, my 2691. So I just drag that, and what I want to do is just bring it into the workspace. So that is now dragging into the workspace. Just need to change the name. Now you can right click on there, and it will give you option to edit the text, change the color, and so forth. What we want to do is essentially just change the name. So let's come out of this, just double click on it, and then we can change R1 and give it a name that's obviously suitable to what we're doing. So we'll call it VM_router. Just change that. Let's click on OK. Yep, so we've got our router named. What we then want to do is right click on our router and then click on Configure. So what we want to do is go to the Slots tab, and we want to add additional interfaces. So additional Ethernet interface. So if we just go into our Network Sharing Center, change adapters, as you can see I've got VMnet 2. These are the adapters created by VMware Workstation, VMnet 2, 3, 4 and 8. 8 is my NATed one. So yeah, let me just minimize that, close this, minimize that box there. So go into the slots option, and then where it says slot 1, under the slots tab, just click on the drop down menu, and we want to choose the bottom option. Alright, and that will give us more Ethernet adapters. So I think it gives us about 15 Ethernet adapters, 16 Ethernet adapters. Click on OK. And then we are now going to go to our peripherals or devices. And what we want to do is want to get the cloud device. So what this, and then just drag that into the workspace. What the cloud device is going to do, it's going to ask us to where we want to run it. Obviously I've got my Z97, which is my PC, and then the GNS3 VM. I've got it set up on my previous setup on the local PC, so I think I'll just keep it on, let me see, GNS3 VM. Actually no, just change back to my PC. So I'll have that running on my PC because that's how it worked for me previously. And then I'll click on OK. Now the name cloud, just move that aside a bit, but I want to change the name, so let me just change this to VM_networks. The reason being, this is going to connect to my, these are where my VM adapters were, which I showed you earlier on my VMnet 1. So I'm going to connect that to the VM networks, are going to connect to the router. So all of these adapters that you see that VMware created are all going to be in there. So we just right click on that. In a moment we're just going to right click, configure, and then as you can see, you can only see my Ethernet adapter at the moment, which is my physical Ethernet adapter for my PC. What we want to do, we can't add any more at the moment, so what we want to do is we want to click on the show special Ethernet interfaces. If you tick that, you see my VM network adapters appear. Now I'm not using VMnet 1, I'm using all the other ones, so what I'll do is I'll just add all, and then I'll just remove VMnet 1, which is the one that I'm not using. So get that out of the way, I'll just click on delete. So all these other adapters will now be available to the cloud device, which means I can then connect them to my my router. So all of them are appearing, that's what we want to see. Click on apply, click on OK. Right, so now what we want to do is get the two devices connected. So let's click on our connection option, or add a link. So let's click on the router. So fast Ethernet F0/0, that's going to connect to my whole internal network, which is VMnet 8. That's my NATed network, 192.168.220.0. So I'll click that to there. That's where all my internet traffic is going to come through. And from there I'll click on let me see, F1/2 I believe I should choose for VMnet 2. I'll click on F1/2 and select VMnet 2 from the cloud, or the cloud option from the VM networks, and then F1/3 for VMnet 3, and finally F1/4 for my VMnet 4 adapter. So all of my virtual adapters on my VMware Workstation are now, or that were created by VMware Workstation, are connected to the router. So all the interconnectivity is done. We now need to turn on the router, so right click and then click on start. That will power on the router, and as you can see, all the interfaces are now green, they are up and running. And from there we're going to go to console, just click on agree and then accept, and it's asking for an email address, so just put in, can't seem to continue, so we'll just put in your email address and then click on continue. So I'll just type mine in. Okay, continue, and we are now in the console of the router. So just move that aside. Yep, just move that aside a second and bring them both side by side so you can see what's going on. There we are. So if we press enter, we can now go into the configuration of the router. So let's do show IP interface brief. That's basically going to show you all your interfaces and their statuses. So your network interfaces and their statuses. You can see F0/0 is currently down. We're going to need to bring that up in a moment, and the other three are all up and running. So F1/2, F1/3 and F1/4 are all up, as you can see. So they've got connectivity. So that's the connectivity between those virtual adapters VMware created as well as the router's actual adapters or interfaces. Okay, so let's move into enabling the fast Ethernet F0/0 is one thing we need to do. So we're going to go to config terminal, so conf t, and then what we want to say is interface F0/0, which is where my local router IP address is, my home router IP address is on. That's my VMnet 8. I'll just show you from here. That is connected to, if I bring that across, VMnet 8. So if I click on status, details, and you can see it's got the IP address of 220.1, 192.168.220.1. Close that off. Close this one off. And then just move that aside, just minimize it. Right, so we need to give this interface an IP address. IP address 192.168.220.2 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. That's a /24. Okay, and then no shutdown to bring the interface up. So that will turn on the interface, and there should be connectivity between the virtual interface and the router's interface. So let's see if we do. So we need to ping 192.168.220.1, which is the adapter on my PC, the VMnet adapter, VMnet 8. Okay, so let's ping that. We have to put do in front of it because we're in the configuration mode. We have to say do ping because otherwise it won't ping. Let's see, and that's gone through. Yep, that's successful. Excellent. So that's what we want to see. So we can ping from that interface, which is VMnet 8, to the GNS3 router. So the GNS3 router can communicate with that interface. Okay, so we now need to do the same for all the other interfaces. Do show IP interface brief. So let's just see what's the status of the IP interfaces. We're in the configuration mode, so we need to do the do command in front of everything. And here we are. So as you can see, 192.168 is up, and it's also up. It's got an IP address. So on GNS3, the interface with the .2 IP address can ping the virtual interface, the VMnet 8 interface, which is .1. Okay, so what we need to do now is do the same for the other three interfaces, 1/2, 1/3, and 1/4, which will connect to VMnet 2, 3, and 4 respectively. So let's say interface F1/2, IP address 10.2.2.1, I believe, yep, with a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask. As you can see, that's VMnet 2. We go to status, go to details, and that's got the IP address of 2.2.2 and the default gateway of 2.2.1, which is this router that we're configuring. So that 2.2.1 is going to be this actual GNS3 router's interface. So close that off, move that aside, and yeah, let's hit enter. Oh, it says IP addresses may not be configured on layer 2 links. So this is configured as a switch port link. So what we want to, it's configured as a switch interface. So we obviously can't do an IP address. So let's do no switch port, and that should remove it and change it to a layer 3 interface. Now, if we apply the IP address, here we go. Because it's a it was a layer 2 interface, it wasn't allowing it. So no switch port. If you get that error, no switch port should allow you. If we go back up, apply the IP address now. If we press enter, and the interface has the IP address now, so that's good. So now let's try to ping 10.2.2.2, which is, yep, that's that VMnet 2. So that's on that's on the VMware Workstation, VMnet 2, so that's pinging. That's great, let's bring that back. VMnet 2, can ping from there, through the cloud, right, which has all the VMnet adapters on there, and it reaches our VMnet 2 adapter. So what we want to do now is do the same thing for number 3 and number 4 respectively. Move that aside. Yep, so let's go into oh sorry, we're already in the configuration mode, so interface F1/3, and we'll give it the IP no switch port to make sure it's a layer 3 interface, and then give it the IP address. We just go back up and just change the 2 to a 3, and then change that to a 3, yep, and then apply that. And again, interface F1/4 for VMnet 4, go back up, no switch port, and then go back up to the IP address and change that to 4, and change that to 4. Right, so now we've given all 4 interfaces their IP addresses. Let's just come out of the configuration mode and let's do a ping. Actually, let's write to memory first before we ping. So that's saving our configuration. Let's do a ping now. 10.3.3.2, that's the VMnet 3, that's pinging. And let's change it to 4, 10.4.4.4.2, sorry, and that's pinging. That's what we want to see. So now we can ping from our GNS3 router to our VMnet 2, 3, 4 and VMnet 8. So all of our adapters are now communicating with our GNS3 router, so we've got connectivity between all of them. That VMnet 8 is obviously my local internet adapter. Just move that aside. Move that aside. So I'm just going to go into interface. Let's do config interface, and then interface F0/0, which is where my 192.168 IP address is. I'm going to change that IP address to, say, no IP address, and I want the IP address of 192.168.220.3.255.255.255.0. I had the IP address of 2 before, and I'm changing that just because the 2 IP address is hopefully going to be my gateway, I believe, for my internal network. So let me just remove that and press enter. So let's do ping 192.168.220. Was it 1? Yep, successful. Windows.2 is live. Successful. Yep, so that's my gateway, and then obviously .2 is my .3 is my interface's IP address. So .2 is going to be my default gateway for the router. So what I need to do is, let me just get up the configuration that I had, is I'm going to create a default route. So let me come out of this, I'll do exit so I can come back into configuration mode, and I'll say IP route 192.168.220.2 actually, sorry, mistake, 0.0.0.0, so that basically means set a static route of any destination that is unknown. Anything that you don't recognize, send it to this interface, which is, or this router, which is going to be my default gateway. Okay, so I'll press enter on that. Now, okay, so I've pressed enter on that. So that's my default gateway. And with regards to my, if I just show you in the background here, as you can see, I've got my domain controller on. I've just turned on my domain controller, which is doing my DNS and my DHCP services. Right, so I'll go into that in a moment, just to show you. If I go into settings of my domain controller in VMware Workstation, you can see it's connected to VMnet 2, 3 and 4, so it can give IP addresses as a DHCP server, and it's also connected to, it's also NATing, so hopefully I'll be able to connect to all of my networks on my domain controller. So let me just close that, go back to my console, and what I want to do is I want to enable IP forwarding, or the IP helper address, on each of those interfaces, VMnet 2, 3 and 4. So if I say interface F1/2 IP helper helper address, and I'll do 192.168.220.130, that's my server in the background. So anytime DHCP requests come in, send it to that server there. And I'll also do it for the 10, and it's also got an IP address on 10.2.2. I believe 3. So it's got an IP address of 10.2.3 for the 10.2 network. So any DHCP requests for that network, also send it to that particular server, my domain controller. So press enter on that, and then go into the next interface, interface F1/3, do the same thing, IP helper address 192.168.220.130, that's my domain controller, or my DHCP and DNS server, and then we'll do 3.3 on that, so 10.3.3.3, that's the IP address on the server for that subnet. And then we'll go into interface F1/4, IP helper address, the same there, and then we'll change this to 10.4.4.3. Okay, so basically when I set up my clients, if I've got clients on the 10.4 network and they want DHCP requests, they'll send it through to the server, and likewise I'll also make the server my DNS lookup server for my router. So in terms of the router itself, I'm going to need to set the DNS or the name server for the router as my DNS server. So I'll do IP, I can come out of this, exit, and IP name dash server, and that will be 192.168.220.130, which is this server in the background, which is my domain controller, as I said, DHCP and DNS. If you don't know how to set that up, there are ways, I'm sure you can find videos on setting up DNS and DHCP and domain controller and all the other services that you need. So initially set it up as a domain controller, then do your DNS and then do your DHCP. So yep, click enter on that, but this is outside obviously the scope of this particular video. So we've got that up and running, so let's see if we can now, let's exit, let's make sure we've got connectivity, ping 192.168.220.130, that's my domain controller, we've pinged it. Okay, can we ping now? So now we can ping my domain controller, and let's see if we can ping the interfaces of the domain controller. Let's do ping, or the 10 interfaces of the domain controller, so 10.2.2.3, that's the domain controller's 10 interface, working. So I guess 3.3 is also working, yep, and 4.4.3 is also working, fantastic. Now can we ping the internet? Let's try pinging 8.8.8.8. So remember, this IP address the router doesn't recognize, so as we set a static route, it's going to send it out to 192.168.220.2. let's see if we can ping this. Fantastic, we can ping Google's DNS servers. Can we then ping by name? So if I say ping www.google.com, let's see if the router can translate that. Unrecognized, okay, that's fine. We need to get that working, but it's not a big deal if I can't get this working. I had this working in a previous lab, but this is not an issue at the moment for the router itself. So if I bring over my configuration, So let's see, IP name server. Yeah. So that's probably to do with the settings on my DNS server itself. Let's do show IP route. So we've got a route out to the unknown networks, which is our static default route, going out to our .2 IP address of my home network, and that basically anything that's outside of these networks that the router doesn't recognize will be sent to this destination. Okay. Okay, so my DNS server is absolutely fine. In order to get the DNS lookup working on the router, what we need to do is enable IP domain lookup. So what we're going to do is go to configure terminal. Oh, let me just click on this. Do config terminal, and in here we're going to write IP domain dash lookup. Once we enable that, what we can then do is come out of that, write to memory, so we save our configuration. Now if I ping, let's say www.google.com, this should then reach out to my DNS server and come back with a ping successful. So let's give that a try, and as you can see, the pings were successful. If I was to do ping www.bbc.co.uk, pings are successful. So all in all, everything seems to be in working order now. So let's just close out the console, and let's just now review what we've done. So as you can see with the test domain that I've got my domain controller DC1 that is doing my DNS lookup as well as my DHCP, and it's doing my Active Directory stuff. And within VMware Workstation, I've got these devices which I haven't opened up here, but they do exist. I've got my domain controller, and I've got an ESXi host as well as the vCenter server, and I've given them these IP addresses. So these two are on my home network, which is my 192.168 network for my home internet router. And as you can see, I've got the 10.2, 10.3, 10.4 subnets for both my DC as well as the other devices here. So yeah, that's just the Active Directory setup that I've got. Just close out of this and minimize my DC. So let's just take a quick look at our VMware Workstation Lab now. So I've just opened up these virtual machines just to show you that everything is now functioning as expected. So we've set up our networks on GNS3. We've also set up our virtual networks in VMware Workstation. We just opened up our virtual network editor. We've done all of that. Now with my virtual machine, so I've got a Windows 10 client here, and if I just show you, if I go down and go to my network adapters, you can see if I click on status, this is picking up an IP address of 10.2.250 from my DHCP server, which is 10.2.2.3, and it's got a default gateway of 10.2.2.1. So everything is now working. 10.2, 10.3 and 10.4 networks are working. If I put this virtual machine on, for example, the 10.4 networks, all I'd have to do is change the settings and then go to my virtual adapter and change that to VMnet 3 or 4, whichever one I want, and it will pick up an IP address from there. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you that connectivity is working. So I'll just close all of this off. So yeah, if I go on the internet, you can see it's browsing, DNS is working, DHCP is working. In terms of connectivity, everything is functioning as expected. It's a bit slow because of the resources. If I just bring over my task manager, you can see I'm using 23 gig of my RAM out of my 32 gig RAM. So you're going to need a PC that's got some decent specs, at least between 16 to 32 gig of RAM and a decent CPU, as well as enough storage for your virtual machines. So yeah, that's all working. This may take a little bit of time. If I go to my local PC, so that's on my VMware Workstation, this Google Chrome time is my local PC. If I bring this across, as you can see, I've got my ESXi set up, which is this machine here. Right, if I click on that, and if I log in, you'll see I can log into my ESXi. Let's just expand that, and you can see I've got my storage and my virtual machines. It's just a little storage I've set up. My virtual machines, which is my vCenter server appliance I've put on there, and that's got an IP address of, let's just take a look at that. So it's got 192.168.220.132. So in fact I've already logged onto it from here, and that's also working, as you can see. Got connectivity to that. Again, it may be a little bit slow because of resources in terms of CPU and RAM, but yeah, that's all looking good. I've got my ESXi host. So this ESXi host for this particular test lab that I've done is the one that's here. So as you can see, ESXi1, I've added it to my vCenter server. So my vCenter server is running on this virtual machine in this ESXi host on my VMware Workstation. So everything is running within VMware Workstation, and everything is communicating on the appropriate networks, whether it be my local home network, which is the 192.168 network that this is on, or whether it be my 10 networks, which is the private networks that I've set up. So it's all functioning as expected. Let's just go back to that particular machine. Oh, DNS may be experiencing some issues. Let's just see. It may be some problems with DNS there, which, yeah, I can resolve. That was working fine, but it shouldn't be a problem. Let's just go to CMD. Ping. Again, it's a bit slow because of resources and so forth. It's just trying to ping Google. Let's have a look. That's timing out. Let's just flush the DNS. So ipconfig/flush DNS, and then let's just try ping that again, and there we go. So we're pinging Google now. We've just flushed the DNS, pinging Google, refresh this, and it's all working as expected. There we go. BBC News, and that's all within VMware Workstation. So this machine is not on my private home network, it's not on my 192.168 network, it's on my 10.2.2 network, but yet it's reaching out to Google. It's doing the DNS translation through this DC, or my domain controller server there, which is also my DNS server, and it's functioning as expected. It's picking up an IP address from default gateway, which is again this DC server. So everything is working as expected. So let's just recap on quickly what we've now achieved. So what we've done, if I just bring up my setup tasks. So from here, as you can see, we've installed VMware Workstation, we've configured the virtual networks and their adapters, and they are here. Let me just lift this up a bit and bring this forward. Bring that up. It's very difficult to kind of get everything into one screen. Yep, there we go. Let's put that over here so we can quickly recap. Right, so as you can see, we've installed VMware Workstation. Hopefully you've done that. You've configured the virtual networks on VMware Workstation, and that then creates these adapters, as you can see on your PC. This is my physical Ethernet adapter. These are all created by VMware Workstation. Once we did that, we also did the networks, and we gave it we did the subnets 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, as well as the 192, and then we installed and downloaded and installed GNS3 along with the GNS3 VM setup, which we did on our VMware Workstation. From there we imported our ISO image for our 2691 router in GNS3, and then from there what we did was we configured the connections and we got everything connected. So we did our VM network adapters and also got them connected to the router and did the tests and the ping. So everything is all working as we expected them to work. We've got our DNS server configured on the router, as well as our helper addresses for any devices on VMware Workstation that need, if they need DNS, not DNS, or both DNS and DHCP, then we've got that all up and running because we've got the IP helper address configured on our router. So this is the basis for setting up your VMware Workstation and GNS3 together in a way where you can have multiple subnets just like in real life, and from there you have your devices within your VMware workstation, and you can put them on multiple different networks. So you can put I could put my Windows 10 for example on a 10.4 network or 10.2 network, whichever I like, and I should be able to ping out to the internet and reach out to the internet. I should also be able to interact with my other virtual machines within my VMware Workstation Lab. So what we're trying to simulate or replicate is a real world environment, and I think we've achieved that with a very minimal and very basic setup. Hopefully you've been able to follow along, and hopefully you've got your network set up in the same, well, your VMware Workstation as well as your GNS3 network set up in the same way as I've got mine set up. Yeah, and hopefully that's all working and you've been able to follow along.
That's it for another video, everyone. If you've enjoyed the video or if it's helped you in any way, then please hit the like button. Also subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date with the latest videos. And hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.